Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Izma, and now I am from English Literature A 2018. And here I will explain about the Edwardian period. And 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 here we will talk about the characteristic of the era, the characteristic of the work at the era, the authors and the works that we know famous in this era, and the review and reflection. So, to some nostalgic observers, the sword reign of King Edward VII at 1901 until 1910 seems like an autumnal ideal, an era of international peace, internal security, and relative prosperity. It was a period ushered in by the conclusion of the South American War in 2000 in 1902 and by the consolidation of Britain's imperial possessions. To some, to some, it seems to have symbolically closed, not with the end of the king's reign, but with the death of Captain Scott and his party in the Antarctic in March 1912, and a month later with the terrible loss of life as the unsinkable Titanic sank in the North Atlantic. So to look back on the Edwardian period is somehow cut off from what was to happen in 1914 is to misread history grossly. King Edward might have been happy with the popularity best of word title of the pacemaker, and even happier with the pomp and circumstance of state visits and intimate and ocular chat with his numerous close relatives amongst the ruling dynasties of Europe. But in Britain, at least, poli- policies were made by cabinets, not king, and the drive of history was far from being in Britain's control. So, despite the reality of its international prest- prestige and power, Britain's economic and military success was now relative. Its rate of economic growth was stagnating, especially when compared to those of the United States and Germany, and its much vaunted naval supremacy was being actively challenged by the rapid expansion of the Imperial German navy. If older type of battleship were now obsoletely, Britain's aim of automatically outnumbering other naval powers became reduced. Military history was being wielded, and those eyes did choose to see could really recognize that a larger and more disastrous convergence beyond that of a ship and iceberg was becoming inevitable. Next, so the women's social and political union was formed in 1903, and between 1906 and 1914, the union undertook increasingly militant action to further this cause. Laws, some of them trivial, were broken, women are arrested, tried, imprisoned, and most objectionable to public opinion, forthwith went on hunger strike. For largely respectable and middle-class in inspiration, the Sugarsford movement was the first galvanizing force in the life of a wide spectrum of British women, for, as one activist later put it provided our education in that living identification of the self and with the corporate whole. The golden age of King Edward reign was not always in illusion, but it was certainly in relative only for the relative privilege. In some significant ways, the early years of the 20th century were marked by the triumphant Englishness, or the very least by the confident swagger and independence of English architecture and English music. It was the age of the English house, and of a supremely sophisticated domestic style, mostly really associated with the name of Edwin Lucians. Next, it was also the age of Garden City and of experiments with urban, suburban, and rural planning, which have profoundly affected both how the English dictated themselves and how Virgin took an English. This architectural advance, which took Britain to the forefront of international innovation in this scene, also touched the life of men and women of the classes. Their edited folkishness was complemented by an eclectic and excellent revival of the Baroque style, which did not simply change the character of the centre of London, but gave a touch of flamboyance to cities the length and breadth of the island. The mainstream English fiction of the early 19th, the religion dog of the preceding 20 years, and the reaction against Victorian repression and social or familial oppression are gradually marginalized. There remains a pervasive desire to articulate the unsaid and to give voice to formerly silent social group, to women above all, and also to often conventional generally ignore petty virtues. To honor Bennett, writing in his disappointingly unadventurous study, The Other, the Other Craft, in 1914, the mind of the ideal novelist should be permitted and controlled by common sense. This common sense precludes a break with a received review of character and with the supposed stability of the narrative form. For both Bennett and Wells are acceptance of literary convention both considerable popular and financial success. Binet works socially interestingly between the police and of an incipient profoundly and city, domestic city, and a taste of exotic and the Paragirania theory. Next is the small and provincial are counterbalanced by the metropolitan and the sophisticated and generation conflict converge, decide and die. Bennett intricately relates his character to the saving topography and geographic class and culture that surrounds them, but he always brings them back to acquired habit, the partiality and to similar qualities, sport and the dead-landed setting, dis- distinguish Richmond stuff. So like an Veronica in 18, yeah, in 1909, the book is forthright in its discussion of marriage and of women's rights, describing very much from a male perspective, and gradual discovery of a sex as thing collectively warranties that I have to mingle with my statecraft if my picture is to be true. It also contains SOPs for the supporters of women's suffrage, forcibly stating a case for the kissing of the coldling and forbidding the woman, and for three fearless participation of women in collective purpose of mankind. The poetry by Y. B. Yeats is rooted in a 19th century traditional very different to Hartley, where Hartley frequently dwelt to cool distillation of in foreign mechanistic and lost certain rapture and elder lovers, yet attempt to assert the power of mystical vision and often passionate sexuality and sensuality. Hartley has a skeptical delineator of incident, yet a seeker of red redefinition. 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 Verbal as much as intellectual, Hartley attempts to suggest philosophical detachment in his poetry, yet expresses for commitment, political and spiritual. So in 1990, a factory medal was stuck in Britain for presentation to all the soldiers who had survived what was described on the surface as the Great War for Civilization. As the work of the war poet suggests, civilization had effectively floundered in the middle of the trance or had been pitted and held by the machi- mechanism and machine of modern military destruction. If Britain and the British Empire had emerged politically unscathed, and same was not true of the rest of combatant Europe, nor was it true of the mind and opinions of survivors or of these two young to fight. When the London-based American poet Ezra Pound wrote Berkeley in Salin Mo Berkeley in 1920 of a human sacrifice in the name of an old witch gun in the teeth for a butchered civilization. He was not merely swimming out a hidden end of an era, he was also asserting the rights and privilege of the new literature, which will attempt to sever itself from the tradition and the traditional sanctities of the old butcher civilization. Okay, thank you. This is all for me, Nur Izma. I'm sorry for any mistake for my uh, pronunciation or my internet connection. So, thank you. See you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.